Public hearing to order. I appreciate everybody being here. We have, specifically, we have 7 people that have signed up to testify. And our first speaker is State Representative Andrew Murr. And Representative Murr, the stage is all yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Could you turn it up a little bit more? Or get a little closer to the mic.
I think I've got my volume all the way up. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
Okay. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the commission today. And I know that you've had a challenge trying to do your work. And I'm grateful for the fact that y'all are taking the time to listen to so many different points of view. In not fully understanding where you are in your work, I wanted to bring something to light that I think is important. I've had a number of constituents in my part of Texas raise it. So I have the privilege of representing 12 counties in the Texas Hill Country, extending down into South Texas and West Texas. And it covers about 15,000 square miles. And I hail from the town of Junction. We have 1 stoplight, unless you count the one by Dairy Queen. So that makes it gets to 3 real fast. But I have been a practicing attorney for quite some time. I do not practice appellate law, but I can tell you that an observation in the past, in the process of judicial selection, I focus solely today on our appellate courts. Y'all are familiar that we have 14 districts. And if you look based on caseload and on the square mass of each one that we have, they vary in size and intensity. And I think modern times, especially from the Hill Country, we have experienced a scenario where many of our Hill Country counties fall into the 4th Court of Appeals catchment area, which covers 32 Texas counties. But what we find is a tendency for the justices to be selected coming from only the metro areas. I think that phenomenon is pretty much common for all of the appellate districts. And I'll also bring to mind the Amarillo Court of Appeals. Some of y'all may have firsthand knowledge of the informal settings that have always taken place where at least one member hailed from Lubbock instead of Amarillo. And I know that that ideology has permeated for at least a couple of generations, but we've experienced a hiccup in the last couple of years with that. So you combine those specific scenarios. One thing that I would present to the commission for study, I don't have all the answers, is the fact that when we review our appellate courts, we have people voting on an entire slate of justices, but oftentimes only the metro area that they're tied to will prevail and decide who sits on the court. And so you don't have a balanced point of view, whether it is up in Amarillo, it's Lubbock versus Amarillo, or if it's in Eastland versus Midland and Odessa counties, or for us, it's in the 4th Court of Appeals with Bexar County and a bit of Laredo, but you have lots of other counties in there. So if someone wanted to try to bring a point of view to the system, it's very challenging to do so unless they hail from the urban center. And so one concept that has been brought forth to me by constituents and has been visited with a little bit is the opportunity to determine whether some residency requirements may ever be valuable, either now or in the future for appellate courts. We always talk about the boundaries, and of course that's something for you to step back and look at. But if we're talking about judicial selection, our scenario is we have 7 justices on the 4th Court of Appeals. You know, one scenario might be that for each court of appeal, the Chief Justice hail from any of the counties. And then for the remaining justices, that be figured out what suits best for that district, depending on how many there are, whether it's Lubbock or Amarillo, or if it's having 4 or 5 justices from Bexar County, and then requiring that the other 2 come from 16 and 15 counties respectively. And so I guess I bring that to the table simply as something for you to study when we try to figure out what works best for another generation of appellate courts. And Chief Justice Jefferson would understand this completely, that our appellate court system is a workhorse. And we as attorneys and as as parties often look to them as the final arbiter in many matters, whether they're criminal or civil. A predominant amount of my practice is spent in criminal defense, but yet I haven't ever had a scenario where I've taken anything. So I have no firsthand experience with my Court of Appeals, other than I have constituents who profess a concern, and they believe that we'll have a growing disparity going forward, especially if we ever get to a point where there's a potential to redraw the boundaries for these courts, because rural and suburban Texas will still probably lag behind urban Texas when it comes to just selecting those that are going to make decisions. And I simply lay that at your feet more as a thought-provoking concept. And I do think this might be a concept that we will consider in the next legislative session. However, I don't necessarily have all the answers. And so I think I'm happy to entertain any questions that y'all may have, but that's, with brevity, the purpose of my discussion today.
Thank you very much, Representative Murr. That's quite interesting and provocative in a sense that it's calling some issues to our attention. Just to make sure I understand it, in the 4th district, are you saying that somehow the representatives on the court are not representative of the entire district? Is that one of your points?
Yeah, for practical purposes, and I'm not going to speak to, I believe at least one may hail from Laredo, so don't let me draw a box there, but predominantly the vote count and the amount of voters in Bexar County will allow a resident of Bexar County to prevail over being a resident from any of the other counties that are associated in a district.
Okay.
That would be my point. And so the perception is, it's not that they're not properly representing them. It's that if you want to make sure that you have a broad cross-section or point of view where different folks bring to the table different backgrounds and experiences, then we might look at a scenario where we do encourage some residency requirements, however those may be best suited. And I do realize that the 1st and 14th Courts of Appeal are going to be much different than the 4th or 3rd or others. Mm-hmm. Another example that I might put out there for you is in the 3rd Court of Appeals in Austin. You know, it actually has a finger of counties that runs out to the west when you look at your maps. And it goes all the way out to Tom Green County. It's San Angelo, well over 100,000 folks. But yet all of the justices on that court do hail from Travis County. And the point of view that I would simply make is that does that provide a unique cross-section for all those jurisdictions, those hometowns that are represented there?
Okay. And let me ask one more question, then I'll turn it over to the other commissioners. You come from a small town, and is it one of the, under our current system, we elect all judges. My question is, do you all know your judges that you're voting for?
Absolutely, without a doubt, yes.
Okay, because in Harris County, for example, you know, we may have 50 or more judges, civil, criminal, and as I've said in other meetings, even I don't know who they are or anything about them. And that may be my fault. But the one thing that it seems to resonate is that in the smaller rural areas of Texas, people who live there know their judges because they go to church with them, go to the supermarket, see them at the supermarket or at the Dairy Queen or somewhere. I mean, is that essentially right?
That is correct. And it takes a lifetime to build a solid reputation and only 5 minutes to blow it all up.
Yeah.
You are correct.
Okay. Thank you. Other members of the commission, questions of Representative Murr?
I'll ask a question.
Yes, Judge.
Hi, Representative. Thank you for meeting with us today. Am I correct that you, for a while, served as the county judge in Kimball County as well?
Yes, ma'am. That's correct. I was the constitutional county judge for Kimball County for half a decade. And
you were appointed because there was a vacancy, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
So what was that process like for you?
For me, I actually had run and was the Republican nominee for county attorney. And then the judge, he resigned because of a death in the family. He decided he no longer wanted to continue in that capacity. So it was decided by commissioner's court. But again, in a small town, you're known by reputation. So, that weighs heavy, I'm sure, into the input process for those decision makers. And then immediately after being appointed in the next cycle, I stood for election. And I guess that would be a referendum on whether or not you're doing a good job.
All right. Sort of a retention election, as it were. Did anyone run against you?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so it was an up or down on, and that would have been difficult for you to lose to nobody.
That is true. That is true. But I like to point out that I think that also sends a good message that hopefully the community was very satisfied with the work that was being done.
Sure. So you speak about the appellate courts and that most of the folks in your jurisdiction seem to come from one of the two urban areas, and you feel your conversations would reveal that your more rural constituents don't, well, no one's coming from those counties. So do you feel like they know those judges or the statewide judges?
My observation would be whether you live in Llano or Kerrville or Hondo, Texas, you're less likely to be able to know your appellate justices, and certainly have less opportunity to interact with them if they are not in that community. And so in addition to that, if someone locally in those communities chose to run or be a participant to serve on one of those courts, they're going to find that the chips are challenging, and the road ahead of them is daunting because they may not have opportunities in the metro area to be able to meet as many voters or develop the relationships with the legal community that sometimes serves as the basis of vetting their qualifications.
Okay, so one last question about your very intriguing proposal or suggestion that a couple of the seats on the intermediate courts of appeal be reserved for what are today not urban areas, although you never know. Would it be a challenge for the candidate? Let's say you were one. Let's say you were running for the Fourth Court of Appeals, and your only competition would come from those areas, but you still would have to get votes. How would you meet your San Antonio, et cetera, voters?
That's a very good question, and that it remains unanswered for me. So, for example, if you said, and again, I've just used San Antonio Court of Appeals as an example. So we have 7 justices there. I would assume that a chief justice could hail from any county in their district. I would also assume that a majority of all those justices need to come from the counties with the highest population. So I don't make an argument that that's not appropriate. But let's just say there were a couple of seats out of the 7 that were reserved for everything but Bexar County. So if you have 31 counties remaining, one would hail from 16 counties, one would need to hail from 15 counties. The question then remains, Judge, is in that scenario, do the folks from the 15 counties and the 16 counties, do they just vote on that one place? And then they do not vote on the other places that are exclusively held by Bexar County, for example? I don't know. And I think that would be something that would be worth studying. I could tell you that if you look at the 1st and 14th, everybody in that area gets to vote for a whole lot of justices. Now, I don't assume that they always know who they're voting for, because that takes a lot of education to get there. But I could see you a scenario where we only vote for those that are supposed to hail from our set of counties, for example.
Thanks. That's very intriguing.
Yes, Judge.
Any other questions yes, Commissioner Babcock.
Thank you. Chip Babcock, Representative Murr, thanks for being with us. To implement your idea, would you have like 2 of the 7, would you have like a place 5 and a place 7, and there'd be a residency requirement for each of those 2 places? If there was a vacancy, then the governor would appoint somebody from those counties to place 5, and then somebody from, if there's a vacancy in place 7, somebody from those other counties in place 7, and then when they stood for reelection or for election, then they'd only run against residents from that county. Is that how you envision it?
I think that's one very logical and workable solution. Yes, Commissioner. I can see that there are other scenarios that you might find work well too, but I believe that what you've set forth seems to be the most logical and would probably be a scenario that's best understood by the electorate. So that would be the constituents understanding, well, if someone's supposed to hail from this group of counties, then only the folks from that group of counties are the ones that are thereby weighing in with their vote. And also, if there's others that are going to run for that office, they need to hail from that group of counties.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions by any members of the commission? Yes, Chief.
Good afternoon, Representative Murr. It's good to see you. In addition to the courts of appeals being dominated by the metropolitan areas, as I think you helpfully point out, we've heard testimony and skepticism about the fact that now in some court of appeals districts, you have to be of a certain political persuasion in order to have any hope at all of winning, and that a lot of these races are swept by one political party or the other. It used to be the Republicans in a lot of places. Now it's the Democrats. So in the fourth court, if everything remains the same, Republicans need not apply. Do you or your constituents see any problem with that? And I don't mean just to focus on Republicans need not apply, because in prior years in the fourth court and other places, Democrats, well, not the fourth court, that's a unique example, but in other appellate districts, Democrats need not apply. And do you or your constituents see a problem with that current status quo?
Thank you, Chief Justice. I'll be honest, I do see a problem with that, but I am not smart enough as an Aggie to have figured out a way around it. I believe that we continue to make decisions based on party affiliation rather than qualifications. And I know that's a challenging and daunting task for the commission to sort through, but I don't see an easy remedy for that. However, from a vantage point, whether they are a Democrat or Republican running from Kerrville or Bernie, Texas, I believe that the chips are stacked against them because they're limited interaction with the legal community in that metro area that is always going to be a deciding factor in the race. And so I hold up San Antonio as an example simply because that's where I'm out of, but I also represent counties that go to the Third Court of Appeals in Austin. Similar scenario, if you don't have good tie into the Austin legal community, then if you're in San Angelo, Texas, and you're the mayor pro tem and a Democrat and you're going to run for office, it's going to be very challenging. So because regardless of your party affiliation, you don't have the relationships in the dominant county.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, I have another question, Representative Murr. One of your colleagues on the commission has reminded us of the importance of the House of Representatives having input on decision-making with respect to judges. And there are 2 states that basically choose their judges by going into legislative session, and the legislature basically names all the judges. What would be your reaction to that kind of a system? In other words, both the Texas House and the Texas House of Representatives and the Texas Senate would basically convene in, I guess, some kind of a joint session, perhaps separately, and name all the judges. I mean, what would be your reaction to an alternative method like that?
My initial reaction is, as y'all are well versed, our Constitution in 1870s set up a weak executive, and so our governor has the primary powers of appointment and veto power, and the veto power is limited to when we're in session or immediately after. So the appointment power of the governor of the state of Texas is one of the strongest powers that the governor has. So I can see folks finding that change, that paradigm shift, to be unpalatable. However, if you're viewing it from the legislature providing the methodology to vet and decide who those judges are, then I guess the only thing that I would add to that mix is, as a member of the legislature, I would look to my colleagues to provide me guidance with an East Texas judge or a Harris County judge, because I'm not going to have as great a familiarity as he or she may have. And so my next question would be, in that scenario, do we then look to the individual state representatives and senators from that region to provide added guidance for each nominee, kind of like we do or we see on in the U.S. Senate? We look to the home state senators to provide us a little bit of guidance. I don't know, but I can say candidly, I would probably look to the folks from that region to give me a little bit extra leg up. And I go back to the point when we talk about in smaller towns, you have familiarity with individuals who are practicing law. And so that weighs heavily on our opinion of their work ethic and their ability to get the job done. So I hope that would have been conveyed to the representative or senator who serves that area in the legislature. So I guess in that model, I would look to a whole lot of guidance from the individuals.
Yeah,
Or
of
else
course,
I
you'd
don't know
almost
that
have,
it's something.
you'd almost have to, because Texas is so big a state. We're not like Delaware or Rhode Island. I mean,
Correct.
all right, any other questions of Representative Murr? If not, thank you very, very much. This has been very, very helpful. And we really
I'm grateful for
appreciate
your
it.
time today. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry, Representative Landgraf.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Murr, for sharing a little bit of your time. The proposal that you've offered has obviously been fairly thought-provoking for all of us. In some of our previous meetings, the commission has heard from a number of witnesses who have talked about the best way for judges to get to know the electorate, or really more important, the best way for the voters to get to know candidates who are pursuing judicial office is through the campaign process. And I know you and I understand that as legislators, but just to use your specific example, going back to the Fourth Court of Appeals, when somebody is running to be a justice on that court, which is, as you've mentioned, based out of Bexar County in San Antonio, have you ever seen anybody in Kimball County?
The short answer is, unless we reach out to them and ask them to come visit, the answer is no. And it's not a slight on those that are running for office, as more of they have a limited amount of time and political financial resources. And so they're going to make sure that they invest that time and that money wisely. And they're not going to come to a small population county unless there is an opportunity laid at their feet. And that's been my experience. And that's just the practical side of politics. And I would go so far as to say this, Representative, I believe that you represent Loving County, and I would liken it to the challenges of going to Loving County and finding enough able-bodied men and women to meet and visit with. It can be the same experience as a judge coming from an urban area, trying to go to a small town and finding enough folks interested to have a conversation with. So it's challenging.
All right, any other questions by anyone? If not, thank you so much, Representative Murr.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. And Representative Landgraf, I must note and I think I speak for the whole commission, your photograph looks very different than you do currently.
Well, thank you.
All right, our next presenter is Judge John Bailey. Judge?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the time today to present some remarks. I want to thank you for your service and your interest in this very important topic. And thank you for this public hearing focusing on West Texas. And I'm thankful that we have Zoom today. I'm fearful had we traveled to Odessa, we might all be spending a couple of nights there because freezing weather and rain is on the way. But with that being said, you've obviously done a lot of work. I think some of the materials that you've assembled that's available on the website will be a tremendous help for years to come on folks that will be studying this issue. Texas is a diverse state. It's diverse in its people, it's diverse in its land, and it's diverse in its judiciary. My thought would be that crafting a one-size-fits-all solution will be quite difficult. But given that I'm an appellate court judge, I'm more interested in appellate court selection. And I think that's what I would like to offer today, is not to advocate any one particular change, but just to offer some anecdotal experience from a contested race that I ran about 6 years ago. I would note that my future colleagues that will be serving on the court with me are signed up to speak today in the form of Judge Stacy Trotter from Ector County and Bruce Williams from Midland County. They probably will give you more up-to-date information. But in my visits with them, it roughly squares with what I experienced, is that for an intermediate court judge, folks really don't know what we do. And I say that, and this is my old football joke, we're kind of like offensive linemen. Unless we false start or we hold somebody and mess up, nobody knows what we do. Once you get in office, that's great. You'd like to labor in obscurity to some extent, but they don't, and they certainly don't know that they know we have a Texas Supreme Court. They don't know that we also have a Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, and I'm just talking about John Q. and Jane Q. Public. I think it would be interesting if we did a poll if they voted early. Say they voted yesterday. My sister voted yesterday in Abilene. If we took a poll of my sister, who should know, and ask her, did you vote in any of the 7 statewide judicial races, to please tell us who you voted for in any of those races, just name one. I think we would she'd struggle to give us an answer to that. And so because of that, I'm sensitive to this area. But by the same token, out here in West Texas, I think most people know who their judges are. And that's where we get back to the one size fits all. It kind of follows in some of the remarks that Representative Moore made about people know their judges, whether it be from church or Dairy Queen or McDonald's or wherever. So for that, I think while the public doesn't know who their judges are or what their judges do, if you go to talk to them about taking their vote away, I think they're going to be hard pressed to agree to that. I didn't watch it live, but I watched the Dallas presentation, the Dallas public hearing that you did. I was encouraged by all the discussion of ways that might not require voter approval, maybe changing the way the ballot is constructed or things like that. So that being said, those are my comments to add to the commission. Once again, thanks for your work. I know this is labor intensive, and thank you for giving us a little bit of time out in West Texas. Thank you.
Judge, this is David Beck. Just
Yes, sir.
to be clear about your comments. When you say people don't know what we do, and then you say most people in West Texas know their judges, do you think most people in West Texas know their appellate judges as well?
I think they do. I think they sort of understand. This is how I explain it to them, is I'll talk about one of their district judges, and they know their district judges, whether our larger areas would be Odessa and Midland or Abilene. And so then I say, well, if someone takes an appeal from Stacy Trotter's court, it would come to me first, unless it's a death penalty case. So I'm able to use that local judge as my reference point to kind of explain where things go. Now, a lot of folks, Midland and Odessa are relatively a recent addition to our Court of Appeals district. And when I say relatively recent, I think it happened in 2003. So sometimes there's some convincing that they have to realize that their appeals come to Eastland as opposed to, they used to go to El Paso. But I do think there is, in our neck of the woods, we're not that big. Most people have some general knowledge of at least our level.
Okay, thank you. Members of the commission, any questions of Judge Bailey? Well, Judge, you got off light today. Thank you.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. Here's a question here.
Of course, you know I would have one. Hi, Chief. How are you doing?
Good, Judge.
If you listen to the Dallas presentation, then you know that there was a lot of discussion about diversity and kind of what that means and what the categories are. Representative Murr has introduced now a new concept of diversity, that being rural and urban within the courts of appeal. In your area, do you have specialty bars? Are there, what would be the elements of diversity that if there were a selection commission or whatever way, if you were going to ask them to look for certain elements, either in the composition of the commission or in their selection of judges? And all of that's very, very hypothetical because we don't know if we want to go that
Certainly.
way. But what are the elements in your area that we should also bring to bear, be it a political party or county of residence or national origin, or what is it that we may not have been exposed to in the other areas that we've spoken to voters and office holders?
Well, I'll say this. We've never had a female judge on our court. In 2025, we will celebrate 100 years of being an appellate court. We've never had a ethnic minority ever be on our court. And so there's certainly some room for that umbrella to expand. I say, as far as rural versus not, I live in a town that has 3,500 people in it, in a county that has 18,000 people in it.
Is that Cisco or is that Eastland?
I live in Cisco, but I work in Eastland County, yes. So that's, I haven't, personally, I have not seen that be an issue. This part of the world is very much Republican. And so our elections are decided for the most part in March in a primary, maybe a runoff, depending on when the runoffs are. It seems like it's awfully early now, but that's really kind of where, for our part of the state, where things are decided.
Thank you.
All right, any questions from any other members of the commission? Yes, Commissioner Babcock.
thank you. Hi, Chief. How are you?
Good.
Even in West Texas, where the judges are generally well known to the voters, do you have to raise money to run for office? And if so, who do you raise it from?
We attempt to, and I'll say this: I'm the absolute world's worst money raiser. I ran. I hate asking people for money, and am terrible at it. When I ran a contested race in 2014, I think I spent $160,000. I think I raised about 30, and the other 130,000 was out of my pocket to run.
Who do you raise for the money you're able to raise? Who do you raise it from?
It's primarily from attorneys. It happened to be for an open spot. I think it's about what I've been told and what I observed is most folks are a little bit reluctant to get involved because they don't know who's going to win. I also heard, but once when you win, you know, the money will come rolling in, and I did not observe that occurrence.
Yeah, is that experience the same for other judges running for office or for judgeships in West Texas? Your experience?
I would think, I assume, you know, folks that come from firms might have more backing or local bars. I was a staff attorney on the Court of Appeals when I ran, so I didn't have a network like that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, any other members of the commission have any questions of Justice Bailey? If not, Judge, thank you so much for taking the time to appear before us. We appreciate your comments. Thank you, sir. All right, our next speaker is Justice John Poole. Chief Justice Poole?
It's just Judge Chairman Beck. Can y'all hear me?
We do, we can.
All right. Good afternoon to the commission and fellow speakers. Thank you for coming out to West Texas virtually to let us have a voice in this study, in this process that's been going on. Some of what I'm going to say is going to be a repeat of what you've already heard from some of the previous speakers. I represent a rural district. I'm the district judge for the 109th. I have 3 rural counties. I'm a general jurisdiction judge. And Chairman Beck, as you spoke previously, I'm also previously went through 3 election cycles as a county and district attorney. And I can tell you that the folks in West Texas know their elected representatives, including their DAs, their county attorneys, and their judges. I see them at Dairy Queen. I see them dropping kids off at school. I see them at the homecoming parade. I see them out and about throughout town, and we have a good, strong connection with them. I'm also a veteran. I served in the United States Army and the Texas Army National Guard from 1987 to 1993. I'm a very strong proponent of the voters maintaining a direct connection with those that are elected representing them, including judges. I recognize that the larger jurisdictions have far different issues than the rural districts and different parts of Texas. So perhaps to echo what Chief Justice Bailey mentioned, one size fits all, I don't think is something we should look at. The vote is important. Maintaining a fair system is important. That's all I'm here to say.
All right, thank you, Chief Justice. And any questions of Chief Justice Poole?
Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's me
Judge
again.
Jameson.
Yeah. Hey, Judge Poole. One of the things we have thought about that wouldn't really change the way that judges are elected would be to tweak the qualifications, the length of service, et cetera, et cetera. I want to say this gently, but there are not as many lawyers in your 3 counties as there might be somewhere else. So what would be qualifications, length of time having a law license? Some people have mentioned board certification and other things. What would be some enhancements to the qualifications? Because you're a district judge, right? So you needed what to be licensed 4 years. That would be helpful, but not exclusionary, so that there would be, you know, good candidates for judge that didn't get cut out of the herd because they didn't have some qualification.
Good afternoon, Judge Jameson. When I used the word retired as DA, when I chose to no longer run as DA and go back into private practice, I had the opportunity to practice all over the state of Texas. I took cases in Harris County and Travis County and Williamson County, Parker County, all over the place. I was surprised to practice in front of judges who had only been in office or who had only been a licensed attorney for 5, 6, 7 years. I was licensed for 20 years before I decided to run for judge, and I am a board certified criminal trial lawyer. I think it could only improve the quality of judges that sit on the bench by increasing the amount of time one must be a licensed attorney. I'm not sure that requiring board certification, unless it was for a specialty court, would be fair to those that practice. But certainly, I would be a proponent of increasing the amount of time that one must be a licensed attorney to 10 years even before being eligible to run for judge.
Judge Poole, what about, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a question here?
Go ahead.
What about a qualification like if you're going to run for a district bench that you have been, you know, lead attorney in a minimum number of trials, or if you are seeking an appellate bench that you've argued, you know, 2 or 3 cases? Because some of the testimony we've heard is not just the brevity of years, but also the very low experience level, understanding rules of evidence or procedure and that sort of thing. Could you see any value in looking at qualifications of that sort?
Good afternoon, Chief Justice Wallace. Absolutely. Going back to my experience, it was just around 8 years of traveling throughout the state, practicing in front of different judges. I'd be a strong proponent of requiring a certain number of jury trials, and especially for an appellate court, requiring a reasonable amount of appellate experience. That's an entirely different world, as we all know, when one seeks to run for the appellate court. And I'm certainly not going to name judges or anything, but I did notice a disparate level of judicial experience and temperament when I practiced in various courts. And from doing my own due diligence, and as we all do, we look up judges that we practice in front of. I was surprised to note that there's actually some judges, district judges, that had never actually first chaired a jury trial. I was shocked actually to learn that. So I would be a strong proponent for requiring a certain number of jury trial experience before becoming a trial judge.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, any other questions by any members of the commission? If not, Judge, thank you very much for taking your time to appear before. I'm sorry, does somebody have a question? I can't see.
Yes, sir. Senator Birdwell, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Senator, I couldn't see.
That's okay. That's okay. I just a question for Judge Poole. Judge, based upon the answer to your previous question, you mentioned various qualifications. Who do you think would be the best certifying official to arbitrate qualifications?
Good afternoon, Senator Birdwell.
Sure. Good to see you, Judge.
Well, I guess I'm not sure I quite understand the question, because one of the qualifications were length of time licensed, number of jury
right,
trials.
or having been a first chair in prosecution. If I agree that there's merit to looking at qualifications and longevity of those qualifications as we're looking at district versus appellate versus statewide judicialships or judgeships. But if we say here the qualifications we want, who is the person that certifies that person's qualified for the ballot? Does the Secretary of State go ask the local bar? Does the Secretary of State do it internally to their own office? Do all 14 of the counties of Second Court of Appeals, if it's a Second Court of Appeals judge, do all 14 of those county bars say yes, they're qualified? Who's the person that says, yeah, they meet the requirements? Who would be that certifying official in your mind?
Senator Birdwell, I guess I'll take the example that would be most familiar to me, would be a district court judge. I would think that the local committee or precinct chairman, be it Democratic or Republican, could have a simple form for them to fill out for, let's talk about a trial judge, a district court trial judge, and say you had to be licensed for 10 years and have completed 5 jury trials. Then one could simply include that cause number and the style caption of the case in one's application for the ballot when one is submitting that to the local chairman.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through the continuity of the definition and who's the enforcer of the definition of qualifications. Because the more people that are doing that, the different definitions you're going to get of qualifications.
I understand, and I think it would begin on the local level.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Senator. All right, any other questions any members of the commission might have of Judge
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Representative
Judge Poole, thank you for your time today. We really do appreciate your testimony, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Landgraf.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Appreciate you taking your time to appear before us and share your thoughts with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Beck.
All right. Next is Bruce Williams. Mr. Williams.
Yes.
You're on.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Great. My name is Bruce Williams. I'm a senior trial attorney. I've been practicing for 38 years as a civil litigator with the Cotton Bledsoe, Ty & Dawson law firm, one of our larger law firms in West Texas. I'm also a Republican candidate for Justice of the 11th Court of Appeals. I had a hotly contested and expensive primary race that was a real awakening for me, but I'm unopposed by a Democrat in the general election, so I will take the bench in January of 2021. I'm board certified in 2 areas, civil trial law and personal injury trial law. I served on the State Bar Administration of Rules of Evidence Committee for 9 years, and I was the chair of that committee for 3 years. So I'm a relative novice in appellate judicial election process, and I received a rude awakening when I decided to run for the 11th Court of Appeals. The 11th Court of Appeals has jurisdiction over 28 counties, the square mileage of which exceeds the states of Vermont, New Hampshire, and New Jersey combined. When people realized that, they naturally asked me the question, well, how do you campaign in 28 counties? And I said, well, you can only do it in one way, badly. Then that would naturally lead to a discussion about, well, how do you solve that problem? And as I discussed with people, some of the things that have been done in the past, I know under Justice Hill, there was a effort to have an appointment process that was universally, of all the people I talked to, it was universally rejected. They did not want an appointed process. But they didn't understand, they don't understand the magnitude of the problem, and they mistrust any appointment process. My awakening included things like fundraising limitations and the rising cost of elections. I raised $60,000. Almost all of that came from family and attorneys. This judicial district has 3 large cities in it, large for us: Odessa, Midland, Abilene. I campaigned heavily in Abilene, and I was able to raise only $200 from Abilene. So that was a very frustrating process in raising money. And that was part of the awakening, is fundraising and the rising cost of an election. Number 2, the lack of education of the public, but particularly county chairs. People do not know. You know, I listened intently with what Justice Bailey said, who I'll work with. I think the lawyers that you deal with know more about the Court of Appeals. The public, in my experience, knew nothing about the Court of Appeals. They did not know that we did not have jury trials on the Court of Appeals. They did not know where the Court of Appeals sat. They didn't know that there were 3 justices of the Court of Appeals. They couldn't tell me the name of any justice on the Court of Appeals. They didn't know how to find out that information. As I said, my race was highly contested. My opponent had one case that went to appeal, and I'd had 35 or so cases that went to appeal in 38 years. My last jury trial took 3 weeks. It was a complicated oil and gas case. But you can make yourself look great on your website if people can remember your name to find your website. So that whole process was very frustrating. The lack of a central location for people to find information easily about who's on the ballot and what their unvarnished qualifications are, they couldn't find. And so we were left with different ways in which I had to campaign, and those included just signs, which, you can put 9 by 4 signs around town. You can, I got billboards. You used newspapers. I'm one of the few that continue to read the newspaper. But of course, the king and where all the campaigning is going now is in the social media, pushing, buying TV time and pushing to social media sites. And that is very expensive and very hard to do in 28 counties. So my experience was very frustrating and surprising. I had no idea that the public didn't know anything about the Court of Appeals, and they didn't know how to find out about the Court of Appeals, and that my sole job was to get them to remember my name, Williams, and I would come up with things like, yeah, just remember when you go to the polls, it's Bruce Williams, like Robin Williams, only I'm not funny. So that whole process, I think, as I talk to people, about, and began to explain to them, and you would go to these forums, you can go to these local forums in 28 counties that the county chairs are putting on. The county chair doesn't have any idea what you do or why you're important. They would have a forum and they'd have everybody, the justice of the peaces, the candidates and the sheriffs, and the county judge and the county commissioner and the city council, and all those people speak, and then you would be the last one. They wouldn't even know what you did, and they would say you got 2 minutes. I noted with interest this morning in the Midland paper, there's an article in the Midland paper on the editorial page that's, I think it's a reprint from the Austin American Statesman, was written by the president of the League of Women Voters and the chair of the Texans for Fair Courts, saying it's time to change the way Texans pick appellate judges. I had to smile when I saw that the president of the League of Women Voters was part of that, because on the League of Women Voters page that came out in the paper, if you take a paper anymore, did not, either in the primary or in the general election, did not include anything on appellate court, on the appellate court. They did for Texas Supreme Court, they did for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, but any appellate court, they had no information, just had a little line saying, go to this, website to find any information about your appellate court race.
Well, Mr. Williams, let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
You've obviously gone through our current process, and I'm just to be clear, are you suggesting that our appellate judges be appointed?
No, I don't. My experience is that they could not, that the electorate wouldn't abide it. They're universally against it. But as I talked to them, they were more, I think, agreeable to a hybrid process. I said, well, what if you had a grading system in which you were given, the candidates were given a grade, that the Texas, Commission for Judicial Conduct or whatever would give you a grade. And they said, well, don't give me a number grade, because I don't know if a 5 is good or a 5 is bad. It's got to be excellent, good, or,
well, let me ask you, anticipating a question perhaps by Senator Birdwell, who would actually be the grader?
Well, that's a great question. And again, I'm a novice to this, and I know Justice Hill went through it, and I remember in the Bar Journal there was all sorts of information about it, and I'm not smart enough to do that. And I assume all of you are on the committee because you are smart enough to do that. But
that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I sure wouldn't have any kingmakers, and I would have that committee rotating, and I would have some way to, I would take out whether they were male or female or what race they were or anything, and just look at those bare qualifications and give a grade based on those bare qualifications.
Okay. And any other questions by members of the commission? Any questions?
I just want to, one comment, Justice-elect, I think you got about 75% of the vote in the primary.
I did.
So, I mean, it was horrible, right? It was
Yes.
more horrible for your opponent, I can promise you.
Yeah, but you got to run like and you don't know. You don't, I mean, you talk to the attorneys and the attorneys know, but the people out there, the people, 99% of the people who are going to vote have no idea who you are. So, I mean,
Good luck.
Like I was behind.
And write a lot of good opinions.
Thank you.
All right. Any other members of the commission have any questions? All right. If not, thank you so much, Mr. Williams. And we wish you well as the incoming appellate judge.
Well, I wish you well as a committee. I hope you're able to do something for the state of Texas.
Thank you. All right. Our next speaker is Justice Den Whalen. Judge Whalen. Megan, is Judge Whalen here?
He's there.
They
Okay.
are. We're trying to get them to unmute.
Okay. And Senator Birdwell, I didn't mean to preempt a question. I just knew that that was going to be an issue.
It shows that you're unmuted.
Can we unmute?
There they are.
All right, there we go. Since I came in at 2:01 for the committee hearing, I just want to make sure that I'm marked as present by Megan. So
Yes. We've got you, Senator Birdwell. And Judge Whalen, can you talk? Can you hear us?
Yes, Megan, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Ah, there we go.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Chairman, Beck and Commission members. My name's Den Whalen. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts and suggestions. I'm in my 14th year as the district judge of the 70th Judicial District, so my comments will relate to the district courts. One of my colleagues is seated next to me is Stacey Trotter, who will be 11th Court of Appeals Justice here in just a few weeks. So I'm going to limit my comments to district court things that we might talk about. I'll echo some of the comments that the people going before me have said. In towns the size of Odessa, Midland, Abilene, the public knows who they're voting for district judge. They see them at church, they see them at charitable organizations. They know them from practicing law with them. Knowing the district judge candidates, I don't think is a problem. I'm in favor of partisan elections of district judges. I've not heard a groundswell of opposition to that. I think it's worked very well. I'm not in favor of appointing judicial candidates by committee. Again, I think the public does a very good job of vetting candidates. If you go by committee, only the politically connected people will be the ones that are ultimately considered for the office. I'm also not in favor of retention elections. The most distasteful thing about running for office, and anyone that's ever run for judicial office, or for that matter, any elected office, the most distasteful thing is raising money. And I think if you have a retention election every 4 years, or whatever it would be, it would require judges to do what I think is distasteful. Let's go out and raise money again. So I had a contested race when I was first elected 14 years ago. Hopefully I'll never have another one. I have enough money left in my campaign account for one more filing fee. So I hope I don't have to go out and raise any more money. I'm mindful of the sweeps though that have occurred in larger counties like Dallas County, Harris County. One size doesn't fit all. What would be good in Ector County or Midland is not something that might work in Harris County or vice versa. I commend Representative Landgraf for the legislation that he introduced last session, carving out larger counties for the legislation that he introduced. I think in rural counties, partisan elections are the best way to go. So those are my comments. Again, thank you for allowing me to be in front of you today. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to address those.
All right. Thank you very much, Judge. Any questions by any members of the commission? Any questions? Judge Whalen, you got off light today.
One other comment, Chairman Beck. I'm glad to know someone else reads the newspaper other than me. So.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. That brings us to your colleague, Justice Trotter. Justice Trotter, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Beck and other members of the commission for allowing us to address you here today. I'm in the same conference room with my friend and colleague, Judge Whalen, because I need him to hold my hand to make sure I don't get out of line as far as any comments I might make. And I'm going to try not to be repetitive because a lot of my thoughts would echo what has previously been addressed to you today. But there is a continuing theme about how things operate in West Texas. I've been practicing law for 36 years, all of my time in West Texas. It is a very unique place to practice law, a very collegial atmosphere, and the lawyers know each other. The lawyers know the judges know the lawyers, the community knows the judges, and the community knows the lawyers as well. And we rarely in this area of the state have any contested election other than when there is a vacancy that exists. I know Judge Whalen, when he ran initially, there was a vacancy. And since his initial election, every other election cycle that he has filed for, he has been unopposed. I've been involved in all aspects of the manner in which you get to office, so to speak. When I first moved to the judiciary back in 2004, I've been practicing a little over 20 years civil defense litigation, and there was a vacancy in the 244th District Court. The judge at that court at the time was Judge Gary Watkins. He passed away, and the passing of Judge Watkins was more than 60 days before the general election. So the local parties were selecting candidates for the ballot for the balance of that unexpired term. So I applied for the vacancy along with 6 other people, and our local precinct chairs selected a candidate, and I tricked them into selecting me. So I was on the ballot for the balance of that term in 2004. I did have a contested election, and for those, I know there's some of you that I'm looking at, Judge Jamison, you've probably been there as well, and Senator Birdwell maybe. Contested elections are very miserable, probably the most experience of my life. But I will say that there's nothing more gratifying than being elected by your community and to have support from your community in the manner in which they will allow you to serve in that capacity. But I was also in the interim before the general election. I was appointed to the position by Governor Perry, so I went through the interview process with the governor's appointment office. So I've been through every aspect of the manner in which you could get to public service. And there's been a lot of discussion about retention elections and what that would entail. It would entail campaigning. It would entail raising money. And I don't know, as far as any type of retention scheme, how you eliminate politics from the equation. When I announced, or when I decided to run for a seat on the 11th Court of Appeals last fall, it is a very large district. Ector County is the westernmost county in the 11th district. And so it involved a lot of travel. And I went to all of the counties in the district, and I was essentially inquiring as to whether or not anyone else was interested in the position to determine whether or not I would have an opponent. I was fortunate enough, unlike Bruce, and Bruce and I have known each other for many years, and we're looking forward to working with each other. I did not draw an opponent. I don't know why. Maybe they just forgot there was another seat that was open on the ballot. But I was fortunate not have to campaign, and I just had to raise enough money for my filing fee, which has essentially been my process in the times that I've been on the district court. I've served on the district court a little over 12 years. I've been at 2 different district courts. I left the first time back in 2011 because I had too many children in college at the time, and I just couldn't afford the situation. Fortunately, we had some raises, and I appreciate Representative Landgraf, Senator Birdwell, and all others in the state legislature that agreed to raise the judiciary. It was long awaited, and it was necessary. And Senator Huffman, I believe you there at the bottom. We thank you very much for going that mile to help us. But going through all those processes, when you look at the appellate courts, because now I'm having to look at it from a dual position because I'll be leaving the district court bench very soon. What's the best method of electing or having your appellate judges placed in the position that they will be serving the public? The 11th Court of Appeals is a 28-county district. As Chief Justice Bailey mentioned to you, it is primarily a Republican district. There's rarely, if ever, a contested race in the general election. But like the district courts in my neck of the woods, there's rarely, if ever, a contested race in the 11th Court of Appeals district unless there is a vacancy. The seat that soon-to-be Justice Williams will be taking after the first of the year, there was to be a vacancy. When the incumbents are in office, even in a large district like the 11th district, the judges know the justices, the lawyers know the justices, and unlike public service, for instance, being in the state legislature, our pool of candidates come from the legal community. So the legal community knows those that serve on the district court bench. The legal community knows that serve on the appellate bench as well. And I think you would find the same scenario, and I've been taking notes listening to the other presenters. If you look, for instance, at the 10th Court of Appeals in Waco, there were 2 vacancies or 2 seats on that 3-judge court that were up for terms beginning 2021. Justice John Neal, who was appointed to fill an unexpired term, filed for a full term, did not draw an opponent. Justice Rex Davis was not going to run again. Judge Matt Johnson, a district court judge in Waco, filed for that spot without an opponent. I think if you go to Amarillo, there was a vacancy, and there was a contested race for one of those seats between Larry Doss and Steve Denny, but there would not have been a contested race had there not been a vacancy. I think the same holds true in Tyler, Texarkana, some of the smaller areas, because in those areas of the state, the people know us. And you've heard this continuing theme, and I think it began with Chief Justice Bailey. One size doesn't fit all. What may be a suitable resolution or a better fix in the metropolitan areas may not necessarily work well in the smaller areas. And Representative Landgraf had introduced a bill in the last legislative session, and I think it focused primarily on district courts and how district judges would be elected. If there's to be a change in the manner in which judges are to be either elected or appointed, maybe that could be a consideration, that if there is to be elections of district court judges, partisan elections in counties in which there's a certain populace, the same could hold true for appellate regions. But I could go on for much longer than my time which has been allocated for me, but I appreciate the opportunity to address you. I'm not here to advocate for any particular system because I'm not sure if I did, I might be crossing the line, and I don't want to have somebody complain to the commission before I take office. So I'll be more than happy to answer any question from anyone on the commission. And if you have none, we thank you for your time. I know it's time consuming, but it's certainly worth the time.
Justice Trotter, David Beck, a question that I have just to clarify. You mentioned that you normally don't have a contested election unless there is an opening or vacancy. Is it your sense that people even know, I'm talking about the voters in West Texas even know the appellate judges that they're voting for?
They do in our area. Yes, they do. We're in a smaller community in areas in which we see each other at functions. There are opportunities to, we do have forums, for instance, where you can get the word out as far as who is running for what office. And be quite honestly, those that live in our area are certainly more familiar with our district judges than they are with the appellate judges, but they do know when someone from your area is leaving to go elsewhere. And so it's just a different scenario. I mean, we don't have people get ousted because of politics. We've never had a Republican sweep. We've never had a Democratic sweep. You get elected based on name recognition and reputation.
People know you. I think Chief Justice Wallace Jefferson had a question.
Yes, Justice, thank you for coming and testifying. My question has to do with, I know you say one side doesn't fit all, and I hear that, and I agree with it. But put yourself in the shoes of a voter in Harris County that walks into the ballot booth and there are, say, 70 judges, and they know really very little about the court system or about the individuals. And then the question becomes, who do I vote for? And you're voting for somebody that might make a decision about life or death or the transfer of $1 billion in a big case and that sort of thing. Now, do you think that there's any merit to looking at that sort of situation differently and maybe requiring some additional qualifications? We've talked about years of experience, but what about if you want to be a judge of a district court that you have to yourself have been in court and tried a case, or on an appellate court that maybe you've argued a case or two before the Court of Appeals and done some briefing? Is in those areas where the voters do not know their judges, would that make the judiciary stronger to have at least some minimal qualifications?
Chief Justice Jefferson, I agree that experience is necessary. And I can tell you after 20 years of litigation, I thought being a district judge would be a piece of cake, and it is a different avenue. It's a different position. I mean, you have a different role, but I was fortunate that when I began practicing law and I began litigating cases, that there were actually cases tried, or at least civil cases that were tried. There aren't as many civil cases tried now as there were, say, 30, 35 years ago. I think in part because of the mediation practice, and I'm not bashing mediation. I'm very much in favor of it, and I did engage in mediation during my vacancies between the district court terms. But we don't have as many jury trials on the civil side as we did several years ago. On the criminal side, it's different. In fact, I'm in a general jurisdiction court, and most of the docket that we have as far as jury trials, I would say 90% or more are criminal jury trials. We don't have family court jurisdiction anymore. We now have a dedicated family court, and we're grateful for that. And when I walk in the courthouse every morning, I salute that court, and I'm so grateful that it's there, that I don't have to listen to any more contested family cases, because they just bring out the worst in everybody. But there were several years on the district court bench where we did hear domestic disputes. But I believe from the standpoint of experience, that it would not be out of line to consider increasing the number of years of licensure before someone would be eligible to serve on the district court bench, conceivably on the appellate court bench as well. I was fortunate as I was trying cases, we didn't have appellate specialists in the firm that I worked for. So I did my own appellate work. I did my own briefs. I argued my own cases. And so I was just kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of not much of anything, if anything for that matter. So yes, I think that would be certainly something that the commission should consider. And 4 years out of law school, no matter how much experience you think you might have, you're going to be hard pressed to feel real comfortable at the district court bench. 20 years, my first hearing, I was petrified. And you still have that anxiety occasionally when you consider cases, but that's something that, yes, I think the commission should take a look at.
Thank you very much.
All right, any other questions by members of the commission of Justice Trotter? All right, there being none, Justice Trotter, thank you so much. And Judge Whalen, thank you too. We really appreciate you taking your time to appear before us and sharing your views and thoughts with us. So thank you all very much. Our last presenter,
Thank you for having us.
Our last presenter today is Julie Moland. Ms. Moland?
Chairman, she is not in our meeting.
She's not.
No.
Okay. Have we gone through then and given everybody the opportunity who signed up to testify before us?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other matters or issues to come before the commission today? If not, I'd like to thank Representative Brooks Landgraf for helping us organize this meeting and being our host, as it were. So Representative Landgraf, thank you very much for all the help you gave us in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you can tell from our witnesses, they appreciated the opportunity to be heard. So thank you for providing the forum.
Okay.
We do appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. All right, anything else?
Yeah.
If not, I'm sorry, did somebody have a point to make?
I have my hand up. Mr. Chairman, I wonder, listening to all the experiences of the judges who have run for office and describing a variety of different circumstances, would it be helpful if we could get a witness who could tell us, or witnesses who could tell us, how money is raised, particularly in urban areas, and how that money is spent in terms of media buys? We heard somebody say to get 6 touches or something costs, a huge amount of money. I don't know if that's as appropriate to bring it up now, but I'd find that helpful if we could solicit that information.
Okay, thank you. Good point. We'll work on that and see what we can come up with. I take it your suggestion basically pertains to the large metropolitan areas?
Yes, I don't sense, and maybe our judges who are still on the line would have input, but I don't sense that these consultants are used very much in more rural areas. It's mostly in the big counties where they're trying to reach, millions of people that they're used. But I know for a fact that in Harris County, Dallas County, Bexar County, Travis County, Tarrant County, that they use consultants and they, raise money a variety of ways and they spend it a variety of ways. And I don't have a good sense of how that's done.
Okay. All right, good point. And we'll work on that and perhaps we can address that at our next meeting. Anything else by any members of the commission?
Just on that, I did use a consultant and paid a consultant.
That's Bruce Williams speaking?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for making your time available to allow people from West Texas to appear before us and present their views to us. There being nothing further today to come before the commission, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Guys,
very
take
much.
care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.